Welcome into the Fantasy Football Diagnostics Podcast, where we provide you with your weekly diagnosis of everything fantasy football. Whether it's season-long leagues, dynasty, DFS, or sometimes even IDP, we got you covered all year long. Let's do it. Let's get to it. Welcome into the Fantasy Football Diagnostics Podcast. I'm your host, Jon Jeune, at the real Jon Jeune _FF. It is Tuesday morning, 7:02 a.m. Eastern. Sorry for being a little bit late, guys. If you're watching live on X, Twitch, or YouTube. Also, welcome into our Spotify, not just listeners, but viewers out there as well, as you can now watch the show on Spotify. And yeah, if you're listening to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Play, appreciate you nonetheless. Guys, make sure you are commenting, liking, subscribing, all that fun stuff, because, it goes a long way to help the show out. Doesn't cost you anything. And, who doesn't enjoy the show, right? Hopefully you enjoy the show. Definitely, hope that we're helping you guys out here. But make sure you are, tapped in every Tuesday, Friday. Tuesday is our waiver show. Friday is our matchup show. And today is Tuesday. So that means we got a waiver show, week 12. And again, we're making that playoff push. Who do you need to add to your rosters? And again, at this time right now, right, I was actually talking to somebody yesterday, and, they're like, oh, yeah, my team is good. Making the playoffs. There's not really much I can do. And I'm like, nah, man, that's where the complacency comes in, right? Right now is a time for you to, even if you're in that position, right, where you've got a playoff spot locked up, maybe you've even clinched, right? Start looking ahead to some of these matchups on defense, right? Start looking ahead to, look at your team, which running backs you have, who's their backup, secure that player so you don't have to spend money on waivers, right? These are the things that you can start doing, right? We ideally want to be ahead in terms of fantasy and building our lineups and things like that, or building out our roster. But a lot of times, sometimes we can't afford to be ahead because maybe we need something. We need to, I had to try to block my opponent the other day, from picking up a tight end so I could try to win my matchup. So, you have to make decisions like, oh, I'm going to drop this player, right? Or I had to drop a player so I had to drop Tucker Kraft last week so that I could, pick up a kicker and win my matchup, right? So I had all my players on bye, right? So all of, these things kind of happen throughout the season, and ideally you end up in a situation where you can be ahead and you can, look to, a couple weeks ahead and pick up a defense, for, a few weeks in advance, right? So you're not spending that money on waivers, right? So ideally that's the spot that we want to get to. And if you have the option or the ability to do that now, I think you should go ahead and take advantage of that, right? This isn't a time to get complacent. This isn't a time to, to say, hey, well, I'm in first place in my league, right? So there's not much I can do, right? I've got a large lead. There's not much I can do. No, this is not that time. So, let's jump into the waiver show. Should be a relatively quick one. There's not a whole lot of guys to talk about. It was a weird week in terms of fantasy football performances for, felt like for the most part, but let's jump into it, man. Starting with the quarterback position, as we always do, and I will scream his name from the mountaintops until he is like 90% rostered. Maybe not really, but y'all here have been listening. If you've been listening, we've been talking about Bo Nix since week 1. We spoke about Bo Nix. And it took a little bit for us to get there, but he's been a staple on the matchup show anytime he's been ranked outside the top 10. So ideally, you guys listening, if you've been listening for a while, you have rostered Bo Nix for a while. If you've needed some quarterback help along the way, or you're in a 2 quarterback league and he happened to be available. But anyway, another top 5 finish for the rookie. He might. I mean, I think he might have finished 4. I was banking on Stroud probably finishing in the top 5, but you think he might have finished 4. And then depending on where you count Taysom Hill, he probably finished 3rd. So, a great performance there by Bo Nix. Might be having the best rookie season right now of any quarterback. And yes, that includes Jaden Daniels. Nix had 307 passing yards, 4 touchdown passes on Sunday. He's the first rookie in NFL history to complete at least 80% of his passes and throw for at least 4 touchdowns and 300 yards. And he's got Las Vegas and Cleveland next, right? Last week we talked about it. We said he's got a string of matchups against Atlanta, Vegas, and Cleveland. That should be, should give us QB1 finishes for the next few weeks. And we're 1 week into that so far, and he gave us a top 4, top 3 finish here. So Las Vegas, Cleveland, next up. Moving on to the next guy, we've got Indianapolis quarterback Anthony Richardson, available in 52% of Yahoo leagues. Talked about him on the matchup show on Friday this past week. Expected him to have a solid performance against the New York Jets. He gave us a top 5 finish on the week. He has a matchup against Detroit coming up, which isn't as good as the one he just had, but given his rushing ability and usage around the goal line, he's got as good upside as any quarterback available on the waiver wire right now. So if you need some quarterback help, I know obviously we've got Atlanta, Buffalo, Cincinnati, Jacksonville, New Orleans, and the Jets on bye. So really, I mean, the Joe Burrow managers, the Josh Allen managers, and possibly even the Kirk Cousins managers, and those that are struggling with Derek Carr out there potentially. Most likely not. That was a joke. But those folks, yeah, Anthony Richardson is probably your guy. Bo Nix for me is like rest of season. I don't have any concerns about him rest of season. Obviously, Anthony Richardson, the floor is here and the ceiling is up here. So, whichever, it might be tough to watch sometimes, right? But he did have a solid game, 20 of 30, 272 yards, I think, something like that. It was his highest passing performance of the season. His best completion percentage of the season, I'm pretty sure of that. So, Anthony Richardson, again, the floor and the ceiling very far away. So the range of outcomes is very wide, but upside, especially if he's running more. I know he was a little banged up, just to kind of start the year, but if he's going to run a little bit more, that's going to add a nice floor to his fantasy upside, and so therefore, definitely would feel good about that. Let's move on to the next guy. Let's talk about Pittsburgh quarterback Russell Wilson, available in 51% of Yahoo leagues. And I know, guys, he totally flopped this past week against Baltimore. And I know he was my start of the week as well. But now that, I'm looking at it, right, I think this has a lot to do with his defense than anything really, and possibly even the rivalry between these two teams, the Steelers and the Ravens. They tend to play in these very close, low-scoring games. The Steelers' defense, they seem to have Lamar Jackson's number for the most part, and so part of what enticed the Russell Wilson against the Ravens matchup was, if Baltimore's offense has been so hot that they have to keep scoring, or that they're going to keep scoring, but their defense is so bad that they give up, tons of yards and big plays. And so that's why they've been that's why they've been so great to target from a fantasy perspective. But this game turned out to be low scoring. So you didn't get much of that. Russell Wilson actually even threw a pick in the red zone, which, squandered his only real opportunity to score a touchdown in this game. So he's got a matchup this week against Cleveland on Thursday Night Football, and that Cleveland defense has been shredded all year. So I think we can put our trust in Wilson this week. Again, the matchups coming up are pretty good for him. Again, he's got Baltimore coming up again, so maybe they turn it around there. But we'll cross that bridge when we get there. But I'm not afraid to go back to Russell Wilson this week on the short week. Moving on to the next guy, we've got New England quarterback Drake May. Solid performance by Drake May this week. Gets to go against a Miami defense that seemed to get beat up by Gardner Minshew this past week. We obviously know Drake May is willing to use his legs as well, so that's never a bad thing in fantasy football. So Drake May, another guy we spoke about on the matchup show on Friday. Again, solid week. He's been solid all year. Hasn't had like crazy upside that we would that we'd like, but if you're looking for a guy who's not going to bottom out on you, I think Drake May can be that. Moving on to the next guy, which is a break in case of emergency. That is Cleveland quarterback Jameis Winston. I alluded to Jameis Winston going ham against the New Orleans Saints pass defense. I did not list him as a player to play on the matchup show, but not surprised that he threw the ball 50 times I think it was, for 395 yards, a couple of scores there. So he's got a matchup against Pittsburgh, which that's why it's the break in case of emergency kind of thing, because Pittsburgh's defense has been really good all year. But the Cleveland defense is so bad, and Jameis Winston, he's got a whole lot of effort in his system, man. So at the end of the day, if he's going to throw these long bombs down the field, that's conducive to high scores and fantasy points and things like that. So I do like these other four guys that I've listed ahead of him this week. I haven't done all my work in terms of looking at the matchups and projections and things like that, but just looking at it off the what I know so far about the season and how these guys performed, I would take these four guys ahead of Jameis Winston. But again, not afraid to go to him if need be in this matchup here. So let's move on to running backs. And there's no singular running back that I want to talk about this week. So we're just going to talk about some of these guys that are, again, available in that 50% or above threshold that I think we should consider for a roster spot, or specifically a roster spot at the end of our bench throughout the week this week. And the first guy I want to talk about is Arizona running back Trey Benson. He's coming off bye, available in 82% of Yahoo leagues. Last time we saw him, he had scored double-digit fantasy points, had finished as an RB2, and I think, again, he's working his way, I think, into some sort of a standalone role here. I also think that we know that he has that built-in upside that if anything happens to James Conner, he can end up in a situation where he has he pretty much has a backfield to himself. But he's looked good, man. He really has. He's been coming on in the limited opportunities that he's been getting. So for me, Trey Benson's a guy that I want to target for sure, especially, coming off the bye week. He might be a little bit under the radar there, but and especially if you're the James Conner manager, you need to have Trey Benson on your team here. The next guy we're going to talk about is Las Vegas Raiders running back Amir Abdullah, available in 100% of Yahoo leagues. And this guy, this is dependent on what happens with the other two running backs, right? He turned out to be one of the only healthy running backs for the Raiders, as both Alexander Mattison and Zamir White left the Miami game with an injury at some point. So Amir Abdullah didn't do much in terms of the run game, did have 3 targets in the pass game, which he converted one of those to a touchdown. but he's if he's going to end up being the only healthy running back this week, then there's if he's going to be the only healthy running back this week, then yeah, I will be willing to pick him up and play him if I'm desperate at running back help, which some teams might be, right? You've got the Falcons, the Bills, the Bengals, the Jags, the Saints, and the Jets all on bye this week. So you might have to do what you have to do against in your matchups this week. And Amir Abdullah in a game against Denver could provide a nice floor in the being utilization in the passing game there. So moving on to Jaylen Warren, available 47% of Yahoo leagues. Again, we talk about him often. He's got true standalone value, especially since Russell Wilson has taken over in this offense. I mean, he hasn't scored less than 7.9 PPR points, had double-digit PPR points last week, and I think he'll just continue to be involved with at least. I mean, he's got, since Russell Wilson took over as a starter, he's seen double-digit touches in every game. So that's something that I feel like we've got to like. Again, available in 47% of Yahoo leagues. So I know that's a little bit of cheating right there because he's not within that threshold, or he's below that threshold that we're targeting. But if he's in your league and you need running back help, then yeah, I would go target Jaylen Warren. Cleveland running back Jerome Ford, available in 61% of Yahoo leagues. He seems to have, a standalone role as well. I mean, his role seems to be slightly better than Nick Chubb's at this point. Nick Chubb was not very productive, did not play a ton of snaps last week, and head coach Kevin Stefanski said that had to do with Thursday Night Football. I mean, we'll see. But Ford has been operating as the team's passing down back as well. So I think there's some opportunities here for him to, provide a nice floor as a running back if need be this week. Cam Akers, Minnesota running back, available at 83% of Yahoo leagues. We talked about him in the matchup show. Gave us an RB2 finish this week. And yeah, I mean, he's got this backup running back role behind Aaron Jones pretty much locked up. Ty Chandler played just one snap on Sunday. Cam Akers ended up with double-digit PPR points, scored a touchdown, had double-digit touches, has double-digit touches in back-to-back games, has at least 8 touches in his last 3 games here. So, looking at this situation here, I definitely feel like, Akers has some slight standalone value. I think we got lucky. I'm not going to lie. We got lucky last week with that touchdown. But, luck is when preparation meets opportunity. He's got Chicago coming up and then Arizona. And again, Aaron Jones has never been, a guy to not be banged up. So yeah, I think if something does happen there, Cam Akers obviously has that built-in upside. Just trying to look at guys who might have some potential standalone value versus, just the pure insurance policies here, because I know it's a rough week with the bye weeks here. So I really don't want to say this name. Chicago running back Roschon Johnson. He seemed to take, we obviously had an offensive coordinator change in Chicago as the Bears moved away from Shane Waldron and they moved on to Thomas Brown. Thomas Brown has history. I think he's a running backs coach in his time in the NFL. I'm not really sure there, but there was an emphasis on the run game, right? And so he, for the first time, all season. No, for the first time all season. Actually, no, take that back. Roschon Johnson had 10 carries for the first time since week 5, had 11 touches for the first time since week 3. I think the 11 touches were, 11 touches, definitely, second highest of the season for him. But he has been seeing his goal line opportunities as well, has been kind of stealing those, vulturing those from DeAndre Swift. So there is a kind of a role here, especially the uptick in touches. I think that, that's definitely something to, to look at as a potential trend here. He's available in 92% of Yahoo leagues. The matchup coming up this week against Minnesota is not a great one, but again, he's got the, looks like some standalone value, and then also has some built-in upside as being the direct backup to DeAndre Swift. And then I think we're about to enter insurance policy season, right? So the next name I wanted to mention was Tajay Spears, but he's available in 52% of Yahoo leagues, but he seems to be dealing with a possible concussion here. So monitor that situation. But it seems like Tony Pollard, he's dealing with some things of his own, and Tajay Spears, if healthy, should get some opportunities. And Audric Estime, waiver wire darling last week, available 50% of Yahoo leagues, went back to a complimentary role as Javonte Williams seemed to be the lead running back again. Not really sure what to do there, but I wouldn't cut bait on Estime just yet. Things like this happen. I think Sean Payton's also trolling us. So, again, Buffalo running back Ray Davis, available 67% of Yahoo leagues, has no standalone value at this point, but he is I think the Bills are on bye, so maybe you don't want to go ahead and add him. But Zach Charbonnet, Seattle running back, available 58% of Yahoo leagues, again doesn't have standalone value, but has has value as an insurance policy. Running back Blake Corum, available 86% of Yahoo leagues of the LA Rams. He is the backup to Kyren Williams. Did see more touches this week, but again, doesn't have standalone value. LA Chargers running back Gus Edwards, available 73% of Yahoo leagues. This one's annoying because he has standalone value when you look at the opportunities that he's given, but when you look at the output, there's literally nothing there. I think at most he's been good for 55 scoreless yards. It's literally been nothing from him. So, but again, the touches are there so it makes you feel like in a good matchup, you might be able to go there. They play Baltimore this week. Not a great matchup. That is a revenge game. So I don't know. We'll talk about that on Friday, possibly, maybe. But Gus Edwards does have the built-in upside again of if anything happens to J.K. Dobbins, that Gus Edwards ends up as being, the guy in that backfield in an offense that we know likes to run the football. And Miami running back Jalen Wright, I just have to say, because Raheem Mostert left that game banged up, available 94% of Yahoo leagues, but he hasn't done anything. So I just have to say, obligatory mentioning of Jalen Wright, because I can't quit it. Anyway, Tyler Algier, he's on bye, available 57% of Yahoo leagues, but maybe you want to pick him up on Monday before Monday Night Football, just in case, especially if you're the Bijan manager, right? I don't know what your situation is there, but yeah. All right, let's move on to wide receivers. And the first guy we're going to talk about is Jerry Jeudy. He's available in 49% of Yahoo leagues. It's funny how I literally spend all year, the whole beginning of the year, talking about Jerry Jeudy, like every week. I talk about him in the waiver show, talk about him in the matchup show, and it never really came to fruition. And suddenly he becomes a thing, right? Back-to-back games of 11 targets, 3 straight games with at least 73 receiving yards. Jameis Winston is clearly good for all these pass game options, and Jeudy is a beneficiary of that. Not giving up on Tillman, by the way, but he's still, Tillman did see 8 targets, so I have to throw that in there, that caveat in there. So I think all of these pass game options can coexist. Elijah Moore included. I'm not going to throw Elijah Moore on this list just because they play Pittsburgh this week, so that's not really a matchup where I'm looking to play all of these pieces here, but willing to play some of them. And Jerry Jeudy, Cedric Tillman, those are some of the pieces I'm willing to play. But I would pick up and play Elijah Moore if I'm desperate. He is dealing with a shoulder injury, so definitely something to monitor there. That's Elijah Moore, that is. But Jerry Jeudy, back-to-back games, all 11 targets. I'm willing to pick up and play that. Next up was Green Bay wide receiver Christian Watson, available in 55% of Yahoo leagues. Watson had his best game in what seems like 2 years, catching 4 passes for 150 yards. With the bye out the way, he's also got a string of plus matchups to look forward to over these next 6 weeks. So, Christian Watson, we obviously know the big playability and the upside that he has. Jordan Love's got some effort in his system too, so he'll chuck the ball down the field, and Watson, I think, will be a benefactor of that. So, moving on to the next guy, LA Chargers wide receiver Quentin Johnston, available in 59% of Yahoo leagues, scoring his 6th touchdown of the season. Obviously, wish it could have been a bigger day for him, but as we've talked about in the weeks prior with his quarterback Justin Herbert, he's got some great matchups coming down the stretch, and so does this guy. If you listened last week, this is literally the same blurb from last week, except he scored another touchdown. But yes, Baltimore coming up this week. So expect his string, this string of solid performances to continue. And now, again, I get it, right? Some of y'all are probably listening to this and like looking at Quentin Johnston's stat lines and being like, well, John, don't you usually say you take a guy's touchdowns away and look at what the stat line looks like? And yes, I am aware of that, but you look at Quentin Johnston's some of these stat lines, right? Last week wasn't, this past week you take the touchdown away and we're talking about 2 catches for 48 yards, right? But it was on 8 targets. The week before, that's 2 targets, 2 catches, 24 yards and a touchdown. You're like, that's not really great. The week before that, though, 4 catches, 118 yards and a touchdown. So, again, there is a little boomer bust here, but these matchups coming up, Baltimore, Atlanta, Kansas City, that's one that, you're probably, but then he's got Tampa Bay, and then he's got Denver, and then New England, right? So Justin Herbert, he's hot right now. I want to be attached to that, so I can't get Ladd McConkey because he's rostered in like 80-something% of leagues, but Quentin Johnston gives you some access to that, or another guy that we'll talk about in a little bit. Moving on to the next guy on the list, New England wide receiver Kendrick Bourne, available in 95% of Yahoo leagues. The Patriots' best wide receiver, and it's not even close in my opinion. He's returning from a torn ACL, or he did return from a torn ACL, and you thought that maybe they were trying to work him back into the offense. He did seem to get benched in week 10 for who knows what, but did see 5 targets for 5 catches, 70 yards, and a touchdown on Sunday. If given the opportunity, he should continue to be the top option here for Drake May. When I say the top option, I mean the most productive fantasy option here for Drake May. I know Demario Douglas out-targeted him, but Kendrick Bourne, way more upside, and just a better overall player, in my opinion. So moving on to the next guy on this list, that is Carolina wide receiver Adam Thielen, available in 80% of Yahoo leagues. Adam Thielen was on IR with a hamstring injury. There's really not a ton of stats here to pull up with Thielen, but he is coming back from this hamstring injury. They saved him, last week from coming back against the Giants. Had the bye week to rest up, and it looks like he's going to play this week against the Chiefs. And so, he's going to slot in as the top option here for Bryce Young, I would imagine. Before, when the season started, there was the whole like, oh, well, Deontay Johnson, he's going to, he was stealing targets, or, there wasn't going to be a ton of opportunities in this particular offense. It was going to run through Deontay Johnson. And now I think it's going to go back to running through Adam Thielen like it did last year when he had 1,000 yards on 103 receptions and 137 targets, predominantly playing with Bryce Young. So, I am definitely like that here. Kansas City matchup, game where they're going to have to score a ton of points. I feels like Thielen could play some, could get some work a little bit, but we'll see how that goes. And then Tampa Bay, which obviously we know that's a great matchup. Philly, Dallas, good matchup. Arizona, good matchup. Tampa Bay, really good matchup in championship week. So Thielen, not going to, be your saving grace as a wide receiver here, but going to definitely add some depth to your roster, and especially, week 14 bye, he plays Philly, so maybe not that week you want to play him. But anyway, Adam Thielen definitely going to provide some value here off the waiver wire. And it's not often you can get a guy with, this kind of pedigree to be available 80% of your leagues in week 12. So, yeah. Moving on to the next guy, that is Pittsburgh wide receiver Mike Williams, available in 80% of Yahoo leagues. Goose egged us in week 11 against Baltimore, but has a matchup against Cleveland. That is one that we've been targeting. So if you need help or high upside flex play this week, he can help you out this week potentially. It's on a short week, so you have to sit there and stomach whether you want to play him. And then if he gets to 0, or something less than 5, you're going to sit there and stomach that for the whole week. But if you're desperate, I think you can definitely throw him out there this week. Moving on to tight end. LA Chargers tight end Will Dissly, available in 76% of Yahoo leagues. I'm sorry. I really wish I had mentioned him in the waiver show on Tuesday last week. I did mention him in the matchup show on Friday, but I definitely wish I mentioned him in the waiver show on Tuesday last week. But Dissly has quietly been a primary option for Herbert in the past game. He's seen at least 5 targets in 5 of his last 6 games, and now set to face off against a Baltimore defense that has been susceptible to giving up production to the tight end position. So, moving on to the next tight end here. New England tight end Hunter Henry, available in 55% of Yahoo leagues. It's been a roller coaster here, but it seems, for Henry, but he scored at least 9.5 PPR points in 5 of 6 games, and has 5 of his last 6 games, and has plus matchups coming up against Miami and Indianapolis over these next 2 weeks here. So, I know it feels like a roller coaster with him, but definitely willing to ride this wave here, especially this week. Next up, we've got Washington tight end Zach Ertz, available in 67% of Yahoo leagues. Ertz has been productive for most of the season, scoring at least 7 PPR points in 5 of his last 6 games, with his best game coming against his former team in week 11. He's been a consistent option for Jaden Daniels all year and should continue to bring a safe floor to fantasy lineups. And for the last guy we're going to talk about today, that's Carolina tight end Jatavian Sanders, available in 98% of Yahoo leagues. Coming off the bye week, he scored at least 9.9 PPR points in 4 of his last 5 games, with at least 49 receiving yards or a touchdown in 4 of those 5 games. He might take a small hit with Adam Thielen coming back, but in a matchup against Kansas City, he definitely should be utilized, as they allow production to opposing tight ends. That's all I got for the waivers. We do have a question, comment. Fantasy football girl advice. What's up, homie? Haven't seen you in a minute. Glad to see you back in the chat. But good morning. She says, good morning. Watch the show from the beginning because 6 teams on bye is killing me. Yes. 6 teams on bye is bananas. And I think we get another 6 teams on bye in week 14 as well. So that'll be a one that we'll have to deal with and manage. Again, next week is Thanksgiving. I know I had talked about it in the previous couple weeks, but I'm going to talk about it again. And I'll so next week, on obviously Thanksgiving is on a Thursday, and then there's the Friday after. I will not be recording on Friday. Instead, what we will do is we will do the waiver show on Tuesday, and then the matchup show is going to take place on Wednesday. And the beauty of that matchup show taking place on Wednesday is we're going to cover every single game, all 16 matchups that will be taking place from Thursday all the way through Monday. Each one will be covered in that Wednesday matchup show. It'll be a live stream. It'll probably go for an hour plus. So make sure you're tapped in. I haven't locked down the time, but I'm planning for the show to start sometime between 5 and 7 p.m. Eastern, right? Again, the beauty of that is whether you're here live, great. Watching it live, fantastic. Appreciate that. But at the end of the day, if you're listening on Apple Podcast, Spotify, Google Play, or you want to watch on YouTube or X or Instagram later, or you want to watch it on Spotify video later, you're more than welcome to do that. You don't have to consume it all in one sitting. It's kind of like Thanksgiving, right? You don't need the whole meal, the whole spread in one sitting. You have leftovers. So if you want to have some leftovers of the show, over the weekend, feel more than welcome to do that. But again, I will let everybody know exactly what time we'll be recording, or we'll be live streaming that Wednesday, so you guys can tap in with us. And Fantasy Football Girl Advice has questions for us. Between the 3 wide receivers that the Browns have, who would you take in a half PPR league? I need some streamers. Moore, Judy, or Tillman? Oof. Well, half PPR, that's a little interesting, right? Because that requires, there's a slightly more emphasis on touchdowns. So I still like Tillman a lot, right? He's got the big playability. Yeah, he's got the touchdowns. He's still getting the targets. Judy did pop off for 142 receiving yards. Has seen 11 targets, but I think that was only his second touchdown of the season, if I'm not mistaken, where Tillman had 3 straight games with a touchdown prior to last week. So yeah, that was only Judy's second touchdown of the season. So I'm gonna ride with Tillman there as the top option, and then it would be Judy, and then it would be Elijah Moore. But yeah, that'd probably be the way I would look at it. But this matchup this week against Pittsburgh is not one that's particularly great. So take that however you can. And she says, nice, thanks. Anytime, Fantasy Football Girl Advice. Anytime. Again, guys, if you guys ever have questions, feel free to drop them in the chat if you're watching live, or if you want to DM me, leave comments, whether it's on YouTube or Spotify. Feel more than welcome. So have a good one, y'all. That's all I got today. We will talk to y'all on Friday for the matchup show. Peace.